Um, Today we found out that 157 people have died because of bad code. Um, there's just no way of getting around it. Some software developers did some bad things, not on purpose, but just because that's the way they programmed it. And I think that's something that's worth talking about. So today I thought I'd share with you guys a little bit about. This is kind of a solemn day. It's kind of a bummer to have to talk about this, but it is something that I think needs to be talked about because there isn't enough discussion about it. There just isn't. Nobody's really saying much about this except for a few people, and I think it's really unfortunate that not enough of exposure is happening to this particular problem. So I'm going to read to you from an article uh, from Mail Tribune, and I'll give a link a little bit later on. But this is from Mail Tribune. This was posted yesterday. This is regarding the. I'm sorry, I said 787. I meant the 737 Max, the Boeing airplane. I accidentally put 87. I apologize to Boeing, and I'll definitely correct it in the title a little bit later on. But this was the Ethiopian Airlines airliner that crashed and killed 157 people. And unfortunately, not only is this really bad for them and their family, but we need to start thinking about this in terms of what's going on with these airplanes that is causing this kind of problem. And for a long time, there have been a few of us that have been saying, look, we need to be more diligent about the code that we write. And unfortunately, this is another example of where just things were not very well thought out. And there may have been some user error involved, but at the same time, it was definitely a situation where the programming for these 737s was leading to this accident. Now, I'm not going to say that as a specific claim, other than what I'm going to be going through here. I'm not about to say that this was something that was, really, really. This wasn't something where somebody was doing some bad intentions. Okay, and I'm not saying that. I understand that Boeing is probably going to be held responsible at some point for what's going on with these aircraft. And I don't want it to sound like I'm throwing something on them that's undue. But based on flight data and cockpit voice recorders on the Ethiopian Airlines jetliner, showed that the faulty sensor touched off a series of events that caused the pilots to lose control of the plane. So they're blaming a bad sensor. And you may think, okay, so it was a sensor, it wasn't software, but let me dig into this a little bit. Airspeed and altitude values on the left side of the Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX conflicted with data from the right sensor, causing flight control problems. Eventually, the pilots couldn't keep the plane from plummeting to the ground, killing all 157 people on board. Now, these are similar problems to an earlier accident that was in Indonesia Lion Air flight, where they said investigators found that software on the plane took readings from the sensors and pointed the nose down. So the software was programmed that based upon these sensors would automatically turn the nose of the plane downward. And I imagine this is obviously a safety feature, right? This is something, you're not just going to have this type of thing implemented without some sort of plan for it to be, to try to solve some sort of other problem. And I don't know enough about airline mechanics. I understand how an airplane flies, but I don't understand the sensors. I don't understand the cockpit in any sort of way, nor do I have any idea about the software that's involved. I don't even know the operating system of these things. I really don't. It's not really what I'm going to get at, though. What I am getting at is this was software that was designed to, based upon sensor readings, do something, like react in some sort of way. And it did its job, right? The software did exactly how it was programmed to do it. In a statement, Boeing said that to make sure unintended activation of the MCAS system doesn't happen again, it's developing software and associated comprehensive pilot training for the MAX. The software update, Boeing said, adds layers of protection and will stop erroneous data from activating the system. There's where it is. Erroneous data from activating the system. So the steps as the pilots are supposed to go through, is if you go through and read this article, the steps are basically that the pilots are supposed to shut off this system called the MCAS and then keep it offline while they try to correct the problems. And unfortunately, that's not what these pilots did. It says the pilots initially followed Boeing's emergency steps by disconnecting the MCAS system by switching off power to a stabilizer on the tail, the report said. But they turned the system back on 32 seconds before hitting the ground and tried unsuccessfully to use it to point the nose up. Boeing's procedures instruct pilots to leave the MCAS disconnected and continue flying manually for the rest of the flight. So, it's very easy to point fingers at the pilots and say this is pilot error, right? And that's kind of one of the things that's going to happen probably in the courts, is to say it was pilot error, it wasn't a malfunction of Boeing. But the bottom line is, I think that yes, we want to be able to give the pilots the ability to override a system. That's obviously uncontrovertible. I think that we need to allow pilots to do it. Now, unfortunately, you also have situations where a couple of years back where there was the Malaysia flight where a pilot just decided that he was going to take over and fly the plane out into the middle of nowhere, and we still have no idea what happened to that plane. But the bottom line is that this software engineers, the developers, now have created a system that has to be shut off in order to avoid problems. And are the pilots, I mean, even through training, you just think about how much training pilots go through on a day-to-day basis, well, not on a day-to-day basis, but on an annual basis. They have to go through a lot of certifications to get certified and on all of these systems. And the more complex these systems are, the easier it is for pilots to become error-prone. It's just the bottom line. Think about your average user. And even if you trained your average user on your software, there's still going to be problems, even from the best of the best. So I think we have to be very careful about the software that we engineer. And this is the main problem. Sometimes the software that we write isn't quite as good as as it should be, right? We let things get out into production that probably should not be out in production. And the fact that Boeing is now saying that they're going to install some additional software to fix this problem is an indication that it's a software problem. Somebody wrote something without this idea in mind, thinking, oh, well, they can just shut it off and that'll be fine, right? That's really kind of a lot to ask of your pilots. It's a lot to ask of anybody, of any person, is to know the exact procedures of the software in order to fly the plane. And our reliance upon computer programming in order to fly these planes is pretty darn interesting, right? I mean, you've got military planes now that are fly-by-wire that no pilot could possibly pilot on their own without these computer systems. So our reliance on the software, our reliance upon the computer technology is just, it's astounding when you sit back and think about it. And so much so that 157 people recently lost their lives because of the software that was in this plane. So I propose a small set of rules for us to follow. And these aren't really necessarily mine. These come from a talk that I remember Uncle Bob gave. And they're not hard, right? They're just things that I think we can each do. We can just kind of, as developers, we can say, these are the things that I'm going to make sure I'm doing. So the first one is stop writing crap, right? Stop writing crap. How many times do we put something together, we write code, and we just do it to make it work, right? Second thing, don't release anything that doesn't work, right? Simple enough. Don't release anything that doesn't do exactly what it's supposed to do. And then third thing is don't release anything that isn't fully tested. And that's kind of the big one, isn't it? Don't release anything that isn't fully tested. What does it even mean to be fully tested? I think a lot of us don't put enough emphasis on the testing to make sure something is good. We just kind of, this is close enough. It does what I think it's supposed to. We don't write unit tests. We don't write acceptance tests. We don't write tests at all. Sometimes it's just, hey, let the person who's working on this thing tell me whether or not it's working. If we just follow these 3 simple rules, I think we would solve a lot of the problems that are in our industry when it comes to writing bad code. And if you don't already know, there's several books written by, there's one book written by Uncle Bob Martin called Clean Code. It's definitely well worth reading. I get into arguments with people all the time about stuff that's in that book. One really good example is, why are you putting comments in your code? That could probably be a whole episode in and of itself. But the bottom line is, you gotta be more diligent. This is a craft. This is something that you should be taking really, really seriously. And in this case, again, it's a solemn occasion. It's a serious situation in our industry when 157 people died because of some software engineering. And yes, I understand there was pilot error. But when we're creating systems that are so complex that a pilot, and you think about what kind of character and what kind of person a pilot has to be, and the training and the knowledge and the information that these people have in their heads, and even they screw up because of the software, right? That should be hitting us. We're software developers. This is what we do. This is our craft. This is what we take pride in every day and what we try to accomplish every day. So if we're not thinking about these systems, and if we are not taking it heavily on our hearts that these people died because of some software engineering that didn't do exactly what it probably should have. It may have done exactly what it was programmed to do, and that's maybe a viable defense. But what are we going to do about this? Because I guarantee it, the governments of these different countries and the United States and the United Kingdom and the European Union are going to start looking at us developers and saying, what are you doing to solve this problem? We can't keep going to Boeing and talking to their management teams and their executives and saying, it's your fault, Boeing, that this is happening. Fix it. And then, of course, those managers come to the developers and say, you guys programmed it to do this way, fix it. And that kind of adds this nice little layer for us to be protected against the government. But at some point, the government will start turning to us and the craft that we have, the things that we do, and they're going to start to say, what are you guys doing? What are your standards? How is it that somebody becomes a software developer? Think about those standards. Like, what do you have to do in order to become a software developer? You just start to write software, right? There is no, there's no bar exam like there is for being a lawyer. There's no medical exam. There's no, 6 to 8 years of college to become a physician, right? We don't have that kind of strict standards in order to become a software developer. And a lot of you guys are beginner developers, and that's great. We probably need to make sure that if you're a beginner, you're not touching anything that is system critical and could possibly cause people to lose their lives. Maybe that's some sort of mechanism we could write in, but we need to start thinking about the craftsmanship of what it is that we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions at this point. I appreciate you guys staying on with me here. I know this is a really difficult conversation, and usually I'm pretty lighthearted. I'm usually pretty upbeat, and this is something interesting for the second Coffee with Steve. If you are at all interested in becoming a member at Programming Made Easy, you get about 10% off on the swag that we got there. So I got things like this coffee mug, I got t-shirts, I got towels and all sorts of stuff, all sorts of goodies. And if you guys actually have any suggestions for designs you'd like to see on the site, some designs for t-shirts, send me those design ideas and I will definitely see about maybe making some t-shirts or towels or something like that. But if you want to become a member, it's just $5 a month. You get access to me directly. You guys can ask me questions through a nice little issue ticket forum that I have. I'm already getting several responses through that, and I really appreciate it, guys. I appreciate the interaction. So it doesn't look like too many of you guys have any questions. I think maybe we're just all kind of on the same page with this. So I'm going to probably go ahead and end the live stream here a little bit earlier than I did last time. I do kind of want to try to keep these things a little bit short. I don't really want to have too many, hopefully I'm not scalding you guys too much. Hopefully I don't have too many of these solemn events like this. But I really felt like it was important today to talk about this. Like this is what we do, right? This is what we do for a living. And are we taking it that seriously? If you thought about the code that you write, is it sufficient to, for people? Is it sufficient that people would not lose their lives based upon the code that you write? Like, that's a tough standard to live up to. But software is in everything now. Software is in our cars. Software is in, the light that's shining on me right now. It's in the camera, just the camera alone, not even the computer that's filming me right now. It's in clothing in some cases. It's everywhere. But yeah, I think it's time that we start really thinking about what it is that we're doing with our software development. What are we doing every day when we're writing code? Are we really taking the time to do our due diligence to make sure it's not crap? It works exactly the way it's supposed to, and that it's fully tested. Because if you think about what the world demands of us as developers, is that really that high of a bar, right? That we don't write crap, that it works, and that it's been tested? Is that really a tough bar that like, are they being too strict on us? That these aren't simple things that we could do every day when we're writing our code? And I gotta say, like, this is, what's really sad about this is I gave a talk on the solid principles at a mini-con a couple years ago. I gave it on the solid principles, which the solid principles are all about good code, right? Good processes, good ways of writing code to make things happen the way they're supposed to. I had one person attend. One. In the door next to me, the room next to me, there were about 35 people watching a talk on machine learning because it was the hot topic, right? I'm just curious, like, which one do you think is really more important to everybody's daily, like, which one is more important? Like, that we write clean code? What does that say about us as developers if the majority of people, and I'm not like slighted about this, I don't feel like it's not about me, right? It's not about me and, hey, why didn't people come to my talk? What it is for me is about what is it that we're thinking about? What is our focus? What are we trying to do as developers? If we're not trying to do the best job that we can to write the best code that we can, and we're just looking at the shiny, flashy thing over there, ooh, isn't that cool? Machine learning, artificial intelligence, ooh. And we're not even grounded well enough in our own principles about what it is that we're writing. What does that say about technology in general, right? What does that say about the code that's going into these technological products that are killing people? And we're not even doing the due diligence to prevent it. We're waiting on our bosses to get penalized and then come and tell us that we have to do a better job. That's what we're doing right now. That's crazy. We need to start bucking up ourselves to what this problem is and start addressing it. We need to start thinking about the code that we write. Start being professional about this code, because it is our signature. It's like we're the ones that wrote it. It's our responsibility. That code, when we do a git commit, it comes back to us, right? It has our name on it. It shows that we were the ones that wrote it. And by golly, when our bosses come back to us, or the government, heaven forbid it's the government that comes and asks who wrote that line of code, and your name is on it, is that because did you do everything you could? Did you do your due diligence on that line of code and made sure it was good before was it crap? Was it something that worked? And was it tested? Right? Is that what you're doing every day? I think a lot of us, if we start thinking about it, no, we don't. We don't. I fully admit to being one of those people that I sometimes forget. I sometimes forget to do my due diligence on this. SAA Consulting says, not bad at all. Very good for pointing this out. Thank you. And by the way, SAA Consulting, I really appreciate your patronage. Thank you for being a member. I know that it's probably a lot to ask, that the people sign up, and it's $5 a month. I don't think it's that much, but for a lot of people it is, and maybe that's not something for you, and I'm fine with that. I'm not gonna, part of the purpose of this channel is to reach out to everybody, regardless of your status. But if you do feel like helping and contributing, and doing the $5 a month to try to help keep this channel going and help me spend the time to do stuff like this, I really appreciate it. So SAA Consulting, I really, really want to thank you for doing that and supporting me. Kent says, the mentality of today is get the product out and fix it later in the hundreds of updates that are sure to follow. That's absolutely correct. And that's also, I think about the insanity. So I do Java. I do Java development too, and I teach Java at WazU. And Java now has a 6-month major release cycle. So Oracle is pushing out a new major version of Java every 6 months now. That's insane to me. I think about all the systems that rely upon Java and how many breaking changes probably come because of that. Every 6 months, a new release? What happens when there's bugs in it? As Kent says, oh, well, we'll fix that up with later patches. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be trying to push out a new major version of essentially of the platform that millions of devices, probably billions of devices at this point, possibly even trillions of devices, are based upon the Java programming language. And they're pushing out a major release cycle every 6 months. And major releases typically cause breaking changes in old code. Steve, thank you. So SAA, I appreciate you letting me know your name. I really, thank you. Now I can call you Steve, 2 Steves. I appreciate that. Well, okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and end the stream here. I really don't want these things to last much more than 30 minutes. I know yesterday was my first one doing these, so it went a little bit longer than usual. But I really appreciate everybody tuning in. I hope that this message hits home. It's an important one, and I know with my students, it's something I'm going to continue to emphasize with them. That this is a craft. This is something that they're professionals. They should be doing something about it. Okay, sorry, a little sidetracked here. I've been calling you Mrs. Kill 'Em Softly because that's just kind of what it looks like, but pronounced Mrs. See Why I'm So Fly. See Why I'm So Fly. I like it. I actually have been a follower for about 6 years now, and I'm excited to be able to support your channel and have this kind of access to your advice. And $5 is a bargain for the content, experience, knowledge you provide. Well, thank you. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Mrs. See Why I'm So Fly. That's okay. I'm probably still going to get it, Miss Kill 'Em Softly. Yeah, just because it's stuck in my brain now that's how it is. But see why I'm so fly. Mrs. See Why I'm So Fly. Okay, I'll have to try to remember that. I'm going to do my best. Okay, well, I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to end the stream here, so I appreciate you guys tuning in. And again, I hope this message really hits home. I think you guys should take this professionalism with you every day to work and think about those 3 rules. Stop writing crap. Don't release anything that doesn't work. And don't release anything that isn't fully tested, okay? I think those are 3 very simple rules that we could all easily adhere to if we just take the time and we don't let our bosses push us into doing the wrong things just simply because it's the expedient way to do it. So, all right. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and good morning.